What if I told you one of the biggest debates happening in Washington right now has nothing to do with sports, coffee, or even real estate? It's this. Is Washington becoming California? Depending on who you ask, the answer is obvious. Some people say yes, higher taxes, more housing regulations, greater density, growing government involvement, expanding environmental rules, rising housing costs. Others say not even close. Washington still has no state income tax. It has one of the strongest job markets in America. The economy continues attracting global companies. The outdoor lifestyle remains unmatched. So who's right? Today, we're putting opinions aside. Instead, we're comparing the facts. Housing, population, taxes, migration, business, crime, transportation, politics, real estate. And by the end of this video, you can decide for yourself. Hey everyone, I'm Jess Hisperia. I'm with Compass Real Estate. I help buyers, sellers, and relocation clients throughout Seattle and the Eastside. Lately, I've noticed something interesting. Whether someone is moving here from California, moving away from Washington, or relocating within the state, this question comes up constantly. Is Washington becoming California? So let's actually look at the evidence. Why people keep saying this? Let's start with why this comparison even exists. 20 years ago, you didn't hear it very often. Today, it's everywhere. Why? Because the numbers actually move. Not the vibes, the numbers. Here's the timeline that nobody talks about. 2021, Washington passed its first ever capital gains tax. 2023, Olympia passed House Bill 1110, ending single-family zoning in every major city in the state. 2025, lawmakers raised the capital gains rate, expanded the estate tax, and added sales tax to services that were never taxed before. March 2026, Governor Ferguson signed Washington's first ever broad income tax on earnings above $1 million, set to take effect in 2028. That's 5 major structural changes in 5 years. California didn't do that in 5 years. It took California decades to build a tax and regulatory stack it has now. Washington just built its version in one legislative sprint. So when people say this feels different, they're not imagining it. Something structurally changed. Let's look at where. Housing. Let's start with the number everyone actually cares about. The median home price in Seattle right now is right around $856,000. King County as a whole sits near $860,000. Compare that to California, where the statewide median is roughly $782,000. Read that again. Seattle's median price is now higher than California's statewide median. Not Los Angeles, not San Francisco, the entire state of California. Now, to be fair, California has cheap inland counties dragging that average down, and cities like San Francisco are still more expensive per square foot than Seattle. But the headline number most people repeat, that California is the expensive one and Washington is the deal, isn't holding up the way it used to. Here's the controversial part. Washington tried to get ahead of this with House Bill 1110, the Middle Housing Law. As of April 2026, 84% of Washington jurisdictions have implemented it. Seattle's permanent zoning took effect January 21st, 2026. Every residential lot in the city now allows at least 4 units. Lots near transit allow 6. Supporters call it the fastest, most aggressive statewide zoning reform in the country. Critics call it something else entirely. In Spokane, the rollout nearly broke the housing market. 6-unit buildings on residential lots created an appraisal and financing crisis because federal lending programs like FHA and the VA cap residential financing at 4 units. Spokane had to pass an emergency fix within weeks just to keep buyers able to get loans. And locally, right here on the east side, Woodinville is now rezoning commercial land along the highway for multifamily housing, a move that's already drawing criticism from King County's own affordable housing committee over traffic, pollution, and equity concerns. So is Mill Housing solving affordability? Too early to say definitively, but it's absolutely reshaping neighborhoods faster than most residents realize. And that alone is fueling the California comparison. Taxes. This is where people immediately think, case closed. Washington has no income tax. End of story. Not anymore. Let's go through what actually changed. Capital gains tax. Introduced in 2021 at a flat 7% on gains over roughly $250,000. In 2025, lawmakers added a new tier, 9.9% on gains above $1 million. That puts Washington's top capital gains rate just below California's, which which sits at 13.3%, the highest in the nation. Estate tax? Washington's top estate tax rate is now 35% for estates over $9 million, among the highest any state in the country. And Washington doesn't allow spousal portability like the federal system does, so a married couple can lose an entire exemption if they don't plan for it. Now, the big one. On March 30th, 2026, Governor Ferguson signed Senate Bill 6346, a 9.9% income tax on Washington income above $1 million per person. This is Washington's first broad-based income tax at nearly a century. The bill passed the House after a 25-hour floor debate, the longest in the state legislative history. It's scheduled to take effect January 1st, 2028. And here's where it gets genuinely controversial. A political group called Let's Go Washington is already collecting signatures to put a repeal initiative on the November 2026 ballot. They need roughly 340,000 signatures. So this isn't a settled policy. It's an active political fight happening right now. Meanwhile, the state also raised the gas tax 6 cents a gallon in 2025, with automatic 2% annual increases starting this year, and expanded sales tax to cover services that were never taxed before, including things like web design, advertising, and custom software. So no, Washington still doesn't have a broad income tax today, but by 2028, if the repeal fails, it will. And the tax mix around it already looks a lot more like California's than it did 5 years ago. Here's something I think generally surprises people, including people who live here. According to 2025 census data, Washington actually had a negative net migration rate of 10.7 per 10,000 residents. Washington lost people to other states last year, not gained, lost. Meanwhile, Washington's total population still grew, hitting 8 million residents for the first time in state history. How do both of those things happen at once? Because international migration and births are carrying the growth, while people are quietly leaving for other states. That's not a Washington specific story. Oregon posted an even steeper domestic loss, but it means the simple narrative. People are fleeing California for Washington isn't the full picture anymore. People are increasingly leaving both states. Population and migration. Let's put real numbers on this instead of assumptions. California lost roughly 229,000 residents to domestic migration in 2025, the largest outflow of any state, and continued a pattern of 8 consecutive years as a top 3 outbound state. Washington gained about 9,000 residents from domestic migration in 2025. That sounds like a win for Washington? But zoom out. Washington had 3 consecutive years of domestic migration losses before that 9,000 number showed up, and per capita, the state is still in a negative territory overall once you weigh it against population size. Now, here's a twist almost nobody brings up. California to Washington migration, the exact trend this whole video is about, is actually shrinking. Data shows fewer Californians are moving to Washington now than in the early 2000s. King County was still a top 3 destination county for Californians between 2018 and 2022, but that volume has been steadily declining. The stereotype of Californians moving to Seattle isn't gone, it's just smaller than it used to be, and the state's own domestic migration numbers back that up. So, who is actually feeling the growth? International migration. Washington added roughly 46,000 international residents in 2025, more than half of the state's total population growth. That's a very different growth engine than what built the Eastside in the 2000s and 2010s. The tech effect. If there's one thing these states unquestionably have in common, it's technology. And this is where the comparison gets sharper, not softer. Washington now has the highest concentration of tech workers of any state in the country at 9.94% of total employment. Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Meta, Apple. That concentration is exactly why Seattle's housing market hasn't collapsed even as affordability worsens. High-income tech buyers keep anchoring demand in the $800,000 to $1.5 million range. The same dynamic that's propped up the Bay Area for 2 decades. But tech is also a double-edged sword right now. Layoffs across the sector in 2025 and 2026 have directly cooled parts of the Eastside market, softening employment and population trends according to multiple regional housing reports this spring. California built an entire economy around this exact tension. Massive tech wealth sitting next to massive tech volatility and pricing out everyone in between. Washington is now living in that same tension in real time. What's different? Now let's be fair and talk about what Washington does better according to most residents. Access to nature, a shorter drive to the mountains, national parks, waterfront, less congestion than much of coastal California. No statewide personal income tax today, though that changes in 2028 without a successful repeal. A smaller overall population at 8 million versus California's 39.5 million. More available land outside the Puget Sound core. Those differences are real, and they're still part of why people relocate here. What's becoming more similar? Higher housing costs that now rival or exceed California's statewide median. Aggressive statewide zoning reform, arguably faster and more sweeping than anything California passed in a comparable window. A capital gains tax approaching California's top rate. A newly signed income tax on high earners with an active repeal campaign underway. One of the highest estate tax rates in the country. Rising gas taxes with automatic annual increases. Declining net domestic migration, the same warning sign California has been dealing with for a decade. These are no longer distant theoretical similarities, they're active, current, measurable ones. Here's my take. So, is Washington becoming California? My answer is not exactly, but I'll go further than I did a year ago. Washington isn't copying California's playbook out of ideology, it's running into the same math California ran into first. Rapid tech-driven wealth concentration, limited buildable land, and a state budget that eventually needs more revenue than a sales tax alone can provide. California solved that math with an income tax decades ago. Washington just voted to solve it in the same way on March 30th, 2026, and voters may get the final say on repealing it in this November. That's not Washington losing its identity, that's Washington facing the exact fork in the road California faced years earlier, and choosing so far a strikingly similar path. Now, Seattle will never be Los Angeles, Bellevue will never be Silicon Valley, Kirkland isn't Newport Beach, but the policy gap between Olympia and Sacramento is closing faster than most people in the state have noticed. So, what do you think? Is Washington actually becoming California? Or is this comparison overblown? I genuinely love to hear your perspective in the comments because this is one of the most consequential conversations happening in our state right now. And it's still being decided. If you're thinking about buying, selling, or relocating anywhere in Seattle or on the Eastside, I'd love to help. And if you enjoy videos that break down real estate, housing policy, tax law, and what it all means for your future, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.